My dear friends, some students they asked me about basic economic concepts and terms. So today I want to explain few of those concepts. Number one is interest. Interest. So most of us are familiar with the concept of interest in our daily lives. We see interest basically an economic term, and we are aware what is interest. For example, if we invest $100 at 10% interest for a year, at the end of the year, we will have $110. This is interest. You have $100, you invest your $100 with 10% interest. So at the end of the year, instead of $100, you get $110. So this is called interest. If we waited another year, we would have $121. After 2 years, we will have 121. If you thought that we should have 120, look again. 10% of 110 is $11. So if we add this amount to what we have, we get 121. This phenomena is called compound interest, where we get more and more money from an investment as time goes on, even at the same interest rate, because interest is accruing based on all the money we have now, not just what we started with. You have $100, you invest it with 10% interest. First year you get 110, second year you get 121, not 120, because this is compound interest. That $1, because you are also getting interest on the initial amount as well as the $10 that you got in the first year. So this is called interest. Some people use the word markup for interest. That is just to camouflage or give it another term. Basically, it is the same. Moral concept of interest, that has nothing to do with the economics. In morality, they say, for example, a person, you give him $100 and you ask him to give you 110, and she or he, they don't have 110 to give it to you, and then you force him, no, you have to give me 110. So that is, morally, ethically, if you can like give him a loan, so that is better. But if it is a business and you are investing your $100, so you must get the interest. I see here in developed countries, people, they are running their economies based on interest. So there is economically, technically, there is nothing bad in interest. Ethically, we should not like force people to give you back the money if they don't have. But if they don't have, why you invested the money there? So this is a pure economic kind of thing, nothing to do with the religion or spirituality or ethics or morality. Now, the next important concept in economics is supply and demand. Just to tell you about interest, I was meeting a friend here in Canada, and he was paying $3,000 rent for his house. So I told him, why you don't go for mortgage? The same amount you pay to bank, and you become owner of the house. So he told me, no, no, this is not allowed, and this is forbidden, and this and that. So I told him that if it was something bad, how this whole Canadian economy runs on the concept of mortgage. So some people, they have crazy ideas, and they don't let you to develop your economic resources, because economy, money, that is the field of an economist, not a clergyman or not a religious person. He knows nothing about economy. How he can tell you do this thing and don't do that? So coming to the second topic, and that is supply and demand. Consider a good that is being sold in many places across a nation. From the perspective of a consumer, generally a higher price will mean fewer units of the good are sold. Generally, a lower price will mean that more units of the good are sold. Generally, a lower price will mean that more units of the good are sold. From the perspective of a producer, however, the higher the price is, the more they will want to produce of the good. Again, the opposite is generally true as well. The lower the price, the less they will want to produce the good. This can be presented by a graph called a supply and demand curve. So I will be sharing where from I'm reading these important concepts. So consumer and producer, if you produce more things and then the markets are full of those products, so there will be less demand. And when there will be more demand, so then you will also supply. So this supply and demand is a very important concept in economics, and this is also important for any producer and consumer. Producer and consumer both have different ends. So from the perspective of a consumer, we have one rationality, and for producer, there is another, because profit maximization, producer wants to get profit, and consumer, she or he, they don't want to spend more money. So this balance is by a curve, which is called supply and demand curve, which I will be sharing with you later, this graph. So when looking at the supply curve, we can see that an increase in price will create additional supply. The quantity goes up, while an increase in price stimulates a decrease in the amount demanded, the D curve. The point where the supply and demand curves cross corresponds to a point known as equilibrium. So in supply and demand, the purpose is equilibrium. And how this equilibrium we reach through market forces. At any other point along either curve, the market forces would drive supply and demand toward equilibrium. For instance, at a lower price, demand would outstrip supply. Unsatisfied consumers could offer to pay more to receive goods, and the increased price in an incentive for a profit-seeking producer to produce more goods, causing supply to increase. In general, market forces will cause the market to move towards the equilibrium point. So this is, another concept in economics which is very important in the developed world, in the capitalism or free market societies, where they let market forces to decide what should be done with the economy. They don't control, they don't manage. The things are controlled automatically by market forces. And that's why always there is consumerism. There is more and more supply, and there is more and more demand. Sometimes the government, they regulate, but not that much. We will come later to the monetary policy and fiscal policy, how these market forces are sometimes regulated by state bank or national bank of different countries. Now, the next term that we will discuss, that is markets. What is market? A place where goods and services are exchanged. One might imagine a bustling street full of vendors and customers, or a stock exchange full of people buying and selling stocks. The difference between stock exchange and a usual market is that in the stock exchange, you have stocks. You don't have goods. Goods are not sold or bought, but stocks, which are the value given to a good or any company, and those values are exchanged or bought and purchased. These are physical manifestations of what we call a market. But the definition is not limited to these examples. Goods and services are exchanged at many levels. We can imagine markets at a local, national, and global scale. We can still use those first mental images, but we should be aware that markets can span continents and cross borders. They manifest themselves in many ways. The most general rules that define the way a market acts is via supply and demand, as we discussed already. Markets are also places where discussions can happen between people and organizations regarding appropriate quantities and prices for their exchange of goods. So we have to diversify our markets. We cannot have only one market, there we are sending our goods. We can have different markets at global level, continental level, national level, provincial level, city level. So market can be expanded, and we can diversify our exports, and we can diversify our markets. The more we have markets, the more we have diversified products, so we will get more profit. Next term in economics is capital. A useful definition of capital is anything that can enhance the ability to do economically useful work. It's a very important definition. Capital is anything that can enhance the ability to do economically useful work. Economically useful essentially means anything that has value to human beings. There are many ways to produce value, so it makes sense that there are several types of capital that we can refer to. Capital is to give value to something. So how we give value, how we make it useful, how economically useful work. So there are different kinds of capital. One is human capital, human resources. Human beings, this is my special interest, human capital. Human beings are who can perform useful work. This includes physical as well as mental work and specialized skills. Investment in improving human capital is generally through education and training. Accumulation of human capital could also mean hiring people who are useful for doing work. So human capital. The next one is financial capital. Financial capital is essentially just money. It is not just money that is in hand, however, it refers to the ability to use money to acquire other forms of capital. In this way, the ability to take on debt by borrowing from someone else is form of financial capital. High value commodities such as gold are often considered as being another form of financial capital. So money, gold, these are financial capital, and we can increase the value of financial capital by investing the capital in a proper way. Even debt or loans. United States of America is the most indebted country in the world, but that is still number one economy and superpower. So when borrowing is not something bad, lending is not something bad, but when you give money, when you borrow money, so you must invest it properly. People, in Pakistan, I worked in National Bank, and they were asking for loans, agricultural loans, for example, and then they will be doing marriages of their daughters and sons, and then they would have not have money back to give it back to the banks. So that was not good use of financial capital. Another capital is physical capital. Factories, roads, buildings, and tools are all good examples of physical capital. These are non-human, non-monetary objects that are useful for conducting valuable work. Physical capital, infrastructure, factories, roads, buildings. This is another kind of capital. Social capital. A company that is well regarded by the populace would have more social capital than a company that is poorly regarded, all else being equal. Social capital refers to the power of social networks to accomplish work. This could be due to enhanced communication abilities, or it could be simply customer loyalty. There are many forms that social capital could take. So another very strange kind of capital, that is social capital. Social capital is your standing, that how socially the people accept you, they regard you, they respect you. So your name, your honor, your respect, that is also a capital. So sometimes, McDonald, for example, they have a financial capital, they have human capital, they have physical capital, but at the same time, they have social capital. If you just open a McDonald somewhere, so the whole area, because of the social capital of McDonald, the whole area will become valuable. So that is social capital. Natural capital: land, forest, rivers, rainfall, wind, sunlight, animals, and everything else that comprises the natural world is regarded as natural capital. One could think of this as the category that includes everything else other than the above forms of capital. So natural capital is land, forest, rivers, rainfall, whatever nature has given to us, that is natural capital. So the next term that which is important to discuss is purchasing power parity. This is very important. Purchasing power parity, PPP. Purchasing power parity is a term indicating equal buying power. The same standard of living cost different amounts of money in different places in the world. Economists define what is called a baskets of goods. They are that are available everywhere that markets exist. We can imagine a hypothetical basket that would cost $120 in the United States and £100 in €100 in France. These numbers are intended to be illustrative, not real. We can see then that $6 has the approximate buying power of €5 in this example. It would thus cost more US dollars than euros to obtain the same value of goods. Therefore, we can adjust our perceptions of income levels accordingly for these countries, since in our example, $1 does not buy as much in the United States as €1 buys in France. It can be difficult to compare the products in wealthy nations with those in the poorest, as product quality can vary greatly, and in this is difficult to quantify numerically. This can cause the PPP of poor countries to be overstated. PPP is closely related to currency exchange rates, but it is not the same thing. So purchasing power, how much like $1 will purchase in US and in France and in Pakistan. This is called PPP. Now, another very important term, that is gross domestic product, GDP. Gross domestic product is an economic measure intended to represent the sum of all economic activity in a country. Economic activity is measured according to market value. Therefore, GDP is the sum of all market value delivered in a country. This quantity is usually presented on a yearly scale. GDP is often given in terms of PPP, since it is more accurate reflection of buying power. Nominal GDP is when GDP is calculated without taking into account PPP. If you view the previous two citations, notice the People's Republic of China is given. So these are some technical examples. I will be sharing this website where from I am reading. So PPP, GDP, and these are important economic terms that I wanted to discuss with you. If you have any further questions, we will continue these series of lectures on economy, because economics is a very, very important subject, and we must understand the basics. Sometimes we use, for example, terms like bailout. What is bailout? So definition of bailout is a general term for extending financial support to a company or a country facing a potential bankruptcy threat. If a country or a company is going to be bankrupt, so the term that we use for that is bailout. It can take the form of loans, cash, bonds, or stock purchases. A bailout may or may not require reimbursement and is often accompanied by greater government oversight and regulations. The reason for bailout is to support an industry that may be affecting millions of people internationally and could be on the verge of bankruptcy due to prolonged financial crisis. For example, if Pakistan needs bailout, why other countries and other institutions will come and will help Pakistan. Because if there is a problem in Pakistan, so in this global village, the whole world will be affected. That's why they come to uh, rescue Pakistan or any other country, just to give them benefits. That is called bailout. So if you have some other questions, we will continue this discussion. And today I try to explain basic concepts of economics. Thank you.